Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's episode, we delve into the chilling case of a home shopping network star's brutal demise. St. Petersburg, Florida, a city shimmering with coastal charm, became the backdrop for a crime that shocked the community in the sweltering heat of August 1985. In the sweltering August of 1985, St. Petersburg, Florida, was not only grappling with the usual heat wave but also with the rise of consumer culture, as seen in the bustling activity at the Tyrone Square Mall. Amidst this backdrop, Shelley Towers, age 45, became a local celebrity as an afternoon host on the Home Shopping Network, an enterprise that was transforming retail and entertainment. Shelley's on-screen persona was a blend of warmth and enthusiasm, which endeared her to many viewers seeking the latest in cubic zirconia jewelry or Ronco kitchen gadgets. Off-air, Shelley was a pillar of the St. Petersburg Community Theater, where she channeled her University of Florida performing arts education into vibrant local productions. She had recently been seen at the Mahaffey Theater, reveling in the success of a summer musical. Shelley's family ties were deeply rooted in the area. Her sister, Linda Towers, was a well-known figure in the community, often volunteering at the All-Children's Hospital, while their parents, George and Margaret Towers, had been fixtures at the local VFW hall before their passing. Described by friends as effervescent and driven, Shelley was not content to rest on her laurels. She had dreams of directing, with aspirations to bring Broadway-caliber productions to the Gulf Coast. Her recent diary entries, uncovered by investigators, revealed plans for a theatrical adaptation of popular works like The Color Purple, which had just made a splash in the literary world. In the days leading to her tragic end, Shelley was in the midst of rehearsals for a play she hoped would mark her directorial debut. She was also preparing for the fall television season, with the Home Shopping Network poised to capitalize on the upcoming holiday frenzy. Her life, it seemed, was a whirlwind of potential, cut short by an act as senseless as it was savage. On the morning of August 23, 1985, the city of St. Petersburg awoke to a stifling humidity that clung to the streets like a heavy blanket. At approximately 7:45 a.m., as residents prepared for their day, with radios tuned to the latest news on President Reagan's tax reform proposals and Madonna's Like a Virgin tour dates, a grim discovery was made in the quiet neighborhood of Crescent Lake. Shelley Towers, known to many through her cheerful presence on the Home Shopping Network, was found lifeless in her craftsman-style bungalow, a home that once resonated with lines from Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, now silent and steeped in tragedy. Her neighbor, Alice Bendinelli, an 89-year-old retiree who had spent her career as a steady-handed nurse at St. Anthony's Hospital, had ventured next door after noticing an uncharacteristic stillness in Shelley's usually bustling abode. Alice, upon entering, was met with a scene that starkly contrasted the vibrant life Shelley led. The body was in the living room, among scattered issues of TV Guide and Vogue, with the television still displaying the morning's broadcast of the Home Shopping Network. The disarray spoke of a struggle, a stark departure from the neatness Shelley maintained, her penchant for order evident from the alphabetized collection of VHS tapes ranging from The Breakfast Club to Gone with the Wind. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community as Alice, with a practiced calmness that belied her inner turmoil, dialed 911. The operator, trained for emergencies yet unaccustomed to calls of such grave nature, dispatched officers to the scene, initiating an investigation that would peel back the layers of a seemingly peaceful neighborhood to reveal a dark underbelly of envy and violence. The St. Petersburg Police Department received the dispatch call at 7:48 a.m., a time when the city was just beginning to stir under the weight of the summer heat. The streets were bustling with commuters, many of whom were tuned into the local radio station, where talk of the Chicago Bears' upcoming NFL season under Coach Dick's leadership filled the airwaves. It was against this ordinary backdrop that detectives Michael Russo and Lorette Cheney arrived at the scene of an extraordinary crime. Detective Russo, a man whose career in law enforcement had weathered the storms of Florida's most tumultuous cases, and Detective Cheney, known for her keen analytical mind and her recent feature in the St. Petersburg Times for her work in forensic science, approached the bungalow on 5th Street North with a sense of urgency. The neighborhood, with its well-manicured lawns and Spanish moss-draped oak trees, was an unlikely stage for such a brutal act. The interior of the home was a stark contrast to the sunny exterior. The living room, typically a haven for Shelley's script readings and rehearsals, was now a chaotic crime scene. Bloodstains marred the floral-patterned wallpaper, and the air was heavy with the acrid scent of violence. The victim, Shelley Towers, lay among the remnants of her life's passions, a blood-spattered copy of the Wall Street Journal, a brochure for the local Salvador Dali Museum, and a promotional home shopping network mug filled with cold coffee. Detectives Russo and Cheney moved methodically, documenting the scene with Polaroid photographs, a standard practice before the advent of digital technology. They collected fingerprints, canvassed for witness statements, and conferred with the responding officers. The murder weapon, a common steak knife from a set advertised in a recent Sears catalog, was found at the scene, suggesting a lack of premeditation or a killer confident enough to use what was immediately available. As the crime scene unit dusted for prints and bagged evidence, the detectives knew that the investigation would be a race against time, with the oppressive Florida heat threatening to compromise crucial forensic clues. The pressure was on to solve the murder of Shelley Towers, a woman whose life had been as vibrant as the community she had served. As the St. Petersburg community reeled from the news of Shelley Towers' death, the investigation turned to Jonathan Stanley, age 34. A fixture in the local theater scene, Stanley was an ambitious director whose dreams of elevating the St. Petersburg Community Theater to new heights were well known. His professional rivalry with Shelley was no secret, especially after their recent contentious battle over the direction of Neil Simon's Biloxi Blues, which had just completed a successful run at the theater. Stanley, with his sharp features and intense gaze, was last seen storming out of Shelley's apartment on the night of August 22nd, following what neighbors described as a thunderous argument that pierced the stillness of the evening. The dispute, it seemed, was over creative differences regarding the theater's upcoming season, with Shelley advocating for the inclusion of female playwrights like Wendy Wasserstein, whose The Heidi Chronicles was making waves in the theatrical world. During the interrogation at the police headquarters, a nondescript building that stood in contrast to the grandeur of the nearby Vinoy Park Hotel, Stanley's demeanor oscillated between defiance and exasperation. He vehemently denied any involvement in Shelley's murder, his alibi supported by a time-stamped receipt from a late-night visit to a local 7-Eleven, where he claimed to have gone to clear his head after the argument. Despite his alibi, investigators were skeptical. The intensity of the argument, witnessed by several, and Stanley's known temper led them to probe deeper. They scrutinized Stanley's past, uncovering a trail of heated exchanges with Shelley that often played out in the pages of the St. Petersburg Times theater reviews, where critics praised Shelley's performances while often critiquing Stanley's directorial choices. As the interrogation continued, Stanley maintained his composure, but his hands, which had so often directed actors on stage, now betrayed a slight tremor, an indication, perhaps, of the pressure he felt as the spotlight of suspicion shone brightly upon him. The investigation's focus shifted to Charlene "Cookie" Christensen, 26, a local exotic dancer with aspirations that stretched beyond the neon glow of the clubs where she performed. Christensen, known for her fiery hair and equally fiery temperament, had a history of minor run-ins with the law, often featured in the blotter of the St. Petersburg Times. Her dream was to leave the world of late-night entertainment, like the famed Mons Venus Club in Tampa, and pursue a career in cosmetology, inspired by the burgeoning beauty icons of the 80s such as Vidal Sassoon and Paul Mosen. On the night of Shelley Towers' murder, Christensen was seen in the vicinity of the victim's home, her presence noted by a convenience store clerk who recalled her buying a pack of Virginia Slims, a brand she favored and one that was aggressively targeting the women's market with the slogan, "You've come a long way, baby." The sighting placed her near the crime scene around the time the murder was estimated to have occurred. When brought in for questioning, Christensen's demeanor was an intriguing blend of nonchalance and guardedness. She sat across from the investigators in the sterile interrogation room, her hands folded neatly, a stark contrast to the colorful tattoos that adorned her arms, reminders of past impulsiveness she was striving to move beyond. Her alibi was a flimsy one. She claimed to have been walking home after a shift at the club, her route taking her past Shelley Towers' house purely by coincidence. The detectives pressed her, questioning her about a series of disorderly conduct arrests that suggested a capacity for violence. Christensen remained calm, her voice steady as she insisted that her past was not a prologue to murder. Despite her composed exterior, the detectives noted the occasional flicker of anxiety in her eyes, a possible sign of deceit. As the interrogation drew to a close, Christensen's future hung in the balance, her dreams clashing with the stark reality of being a suspect in a high-profile murder case. On the hot morning of August 30th, 1985, as St. Petersburg residents perused the St. Petersburg Times for updates on the local mayoral race, a significant break occurred in the Towers case. At approximately 10:15 a.m., under the relentless Florida sun, a sanitation worker emptying dumpsters behind the commercial strip on 4th Street North discovered a blood-stained glove among the refuse of a busy Burger King. The glove, a common latex variety often used in household chores and advertised in the latest JCPenney catalog, seemed incongruous amid fast food wrappers and discarded new Coke cans, a failed rebranding attempt by Coca-Cola that summer. The sanitation worker, aware of the ongoing investigation from the buzz on the local news, immediately informed the authorities. Detectives Russo and Cheney arrived shortly after, the urgency palpable as they secured the area. The glove was carefully collected and sent to the forensics lab for analysis, where technicians would perform DNA testing, a burgeoning field of science that was beginning to revolutionize criminal investigations. The discovery of the glove prompted a flurry of activity at the police department. The evidence, potentially linking the killer to the crime scene, was a tangible piece of the puzzle that had, until then, eluded the investigators. The results would take time, but the detectives understood the gravity of the find. It could very well be the key to unlocking the mystery of who had brutally ended Shelley Towers' life. As the day wore on, the heat did little to dampen the resolve of the St. Petersburg police. If the glove matched the blood type found at the crime scene, it would narrow down the list of suspects and bring them one step closer to justice for Shelley. The community, still reeling from the loss, watched and waited, hoping for closure to a case that had shaken the city to its core. As the Florida sun cast long shadows over St. Petersburg, the investigation took a turn towards Robert J. Stanhope, a 67-year-old retiree from Centerville, Ohio. Stanhope's life was a stark contrast to the vibrant art scene that Shelley Towers had inhabited. A former employee in the tractor business, his days were now filled with leisurely rounds of golf at the local course and the occasional fishing trip off the Gulf Pier, a tranquil routine disrupted by the murder investigation. Stanhope's connection to Shelley was not just through shared history. He was intricately linked to the present drama as the ex-husband of the victim and the current romantic partner of the first suspect, Jonathan Stanley. His personality, often described as affable and laid-back, seemed at odds with the crime's violent nature. Yet, investigators speculated that beneath the genial exterior could lie motives of jealousy or financial gain, perhaps tied to Shelley's rising success or Jonathan's ambitions. During the interrogation, Stanhope maintained a composed demeanor, his responses measured and tinged with a sadness that seemed genuine. He recounted his movements with a precision that suggested a man more accustomed to the orderly world of machinery than the chaotic realm of crime. He spoke of his dreams, now soured by the specter of suspicion, of a peaceful retirement filled with simple pleasures and free from the complications of his past. Stanhope's alibi for the night of the murder was scrutinized against a backdrop of 1985 St. Petersburg, where the local news was abuzz with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers preseason games and the opening of the new Salvador Dali Museum. His claims of attending a quiet dinner at the Pier restaurant, a popular spot for locals and tourists alike, followed by a solitary evening listening to the latest Dire Straits album, Brothers in Arms, on his high-fidelity stereo system, were carefully checked against receipts and witness statements. As the detectives pieced together the timeline, they weighed Stanhope's words against the evidence collected, aware that the truth lay somewhere amidst the retiree's recollections and the physical clues left behind. Could this seemingly ordinary retiree hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Shelley Towers' death? In the sweltering August heat of 1985, the St. Petersburg Police Department found themselves sifting through the lives entangled in the tragic demise of Shelley Towers. It was Jonathan Stanley, a 34-year-old theater director with sharp ambitions, who emerged as the perpetrator of this heinous act. Stanley, once a beacon of potential in the local arts scene, now stood accused of extinguishing one of its brightest lights. The investigation revealed a man driven not by the pursuit of artistic excellence, but by a voracious hunger for control and recognition. His aspirations had been to transform the St. Petersburg Community Theater into a powerhouse, rivaling the acclaim of Broadway itself. Stanley's vision was grand, but his methods, as the investigation uncovered, were rooted in a darker reality. The evening of the murder, Stanley had attended a performance of A Chorus Line at the Bayfront Center, an event confirmed by ticket stubs and eyewitness accounts. However, it was after the curtain fell that Stanley's true intentions unfolded. He visited Shelley under the guise of discussing their creative differences, only to engage in a fatal altercation that ended with him stabbing her 27 times with a steak knife. A model recently featured in a Sears catalog as part of a robust kitchenware set. Stanley's motive was as clear as it was chilling. By eliminating Shelley, he aimed to dissolve the one obstacle that stood between him and total dominion over the theater they both cherished. In his mind, her death was a necessary sacrifice on the altar of his ambition. It was a narrative that echoed the era's ruthless corporate ethos, a time when figures like Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street were celebrated for their unyielding pursuit of power. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the police apprehended Stanley without incident. He was found in his apartment, surrounded by stacks of plays and directorial notes, a stark contrast to the chaos he had wrought. His reaction to the arrest was one of disbelief. The final curtain had fallen on his freedom, and with it, his dreams. The stifling heat of an August afternoon in 1985 did little to deter the resolve of the St. Petersburg Police Department. On the 2nd of the month, as the local community buzzed about the upcoming premiere of Pee-wee's Big Adventure at the theaters and the latest Space Shuttle Discovery mission, a more terrestrial drama was reaching its climax. The detectives, armed with the conclusive evidence from the blood-stained glove and a damning wiretap recording that captured a confession, descended upon the residence of Jonathan Stanley. The home, once a haven for thespian strategizing and post-rehearsal celebrations, was now the site of a final act that none would applaud, a suspect's arrest for the murder of Shelley Towers. Jonathan Stanley, 34, stood in disbelief as the officers read him his rights. The man who had once commanded the stage with a director's authority now found his script irrevocably altered. His reaction, a mixture of shock and a dawning realization of the consequences of his actions, was a stark contrast to the composed figure the community had known. Meanwhile, Shelley's family, who had been following the case with a mix of hope and heartache, received the news of the arrest. While justice seemed to be on the horizon, it did little to fill the void left by Shelley's absence. Her sister, Linda, who had spent the past weeks in a haze of grief, now faced the reality of a legal battle that would discredit the memory of her beloved sibling. The community, too, reacted to the news with a collective sense of relief and horror. The local media, including the St. Petersburg Times, were quick to report on the turn of events, their headlines a sobering reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. As the sun set on that fateful day, the residents of St. Petersburg grappled with the duality of their city, a place of sunlit beaches and darkened theaters, where dreams could be both made and unmade by the hands of ambition. As the gavel sounded in the courtroom of the Pinellas County Justice Center, the trial of Jonathan Stanley commenced, capturing the attention of a community still grappling with the brutal murder of Shelley Towers. The prosecution, led by Elizabeth Laclay, a 38-year-old assistant state attorney with a reputation for her tenacious courtroom presence, presented a narrative of envy and ambition turned lethal. She painted Stanley as a man whose aspirations for theatrical dominance in St. Petersburg led him to silence his most formidable competitor. Laclay meticulously laid out the timeline of events, corroborated by witness testimonies and the damning evidence of the bloodied glove found discarded near a local Burger King, an establishment that had recently introduced its Where's Herb advertising campaign to the public. She referenced the cultural zeitgeist of 1985, drawing parallels to the cutthroat competition depicted in the boardrooms of the popular television series Dynasty. In contrast, defense attorney Jack Mosen, 45, known for his composed courtroom demeanor and a persuasive orator, argued that Stanley's passion for the theater was being misconstrued as a motive for murder. He suggested that the evidence was circumstantial, questioning the reliability of DNA testing, a science still in its infancy compared to the fingerprint analysis that had long been the gold standard in forensics. The victim's family, seated in the front row and often clutching each other for support, displayed a range of emotions from quiet tears to visible anger as they listened to the proceedings. They were surrounded by a community that had followed the case closely, from the initial reports in the St. Petersburg Times to the courtroom drama that now unfolded before them. As the trial progressed, the prosecution and defense engaged in a legal ballet, each maneuvering for the favor of the jury. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, much like the humidity outside the courthouse where onlookers gathered, awaiting the outcome of a trial that would deliver either justice for Shelley Towers or a continued search for answers. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury returned to deliver the verdict in the highly publicized murder trial of Jonathan Stanley. The case had riveted St. Petersburg, a city where the tranquility of its Gulf Coast beaches contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions unleashed by Shelley Towers' tragic death. As the court awaited the jury's decision, the air was thick with anticipation, much like the atmosphere at Tropicana Field during a tie-breaking baseball game. Elizabeth Laclay, the prosecutor, stood resolute, her case built on a foundation of forensic evidence and witness testimonies that she had argued pointed unequivocally to Stanley's guilt. Defense attorney Jack Mosen, equally steadfast, had challenged the prosecution's assertions, suggesting that the field of blood-type evidence was not as infallible as the public, buoyed by the optimism of scientific advancement in the space shuttle program might believe. The jury, having been sequestered for days, much like the viewers who had eagerly awaited the outcome of the Who Shot J.R. mystery on Dallas years prior, had reached a unanimous decision. Guilty. The courtroom, filled with the victim's family and friends, some of whom wore pins bearing Shelley's image, akin to the Live Aid concert memorabilia that symbolized global unity, let out a collective, yet subdued, sigh of relief. Sentencing was swift, with the judge issuing life without the possibility of parole. The sentence was a reflection of the severity of the crime and the community's desire for justice, a sentiment echoed in editorials in the St. Petersburg Times. Some felt the punishment was just, while others debated the merits of retribution versus rehabilitation, a conversation that mirrored national discussions fueled by the controversial Just Say No campaign against drugs. The verdict had a profound effect on Shelley Towers' friends and family. For them, the sentencing provided a semblance of closure, though the absence of Shelley's vibrant presence remained a void no judgment could fill. The community, having been a collective witness to the unfolding drama, hoped to find peace and return to a sense of normalcy, much like the rest of the country sought comfort in the familiarity of sitcoms like The Golden Girls. In the aftermath of the trial that had captivated St. Petersburg, the city sought to heal and move forward. The verdant palm-lined streets and bustling marinas slowly returned to their usual pace, the echoes of the case receding into the background like the fading notes of a Dire Straits track on the radio. Detectives Michael Russo and Laurette Cheney, who had become local figures due to their involvement in the high-profile case, continued their work with the St. Petersburg Police Department. They carried with them the experience of the Towers investigation, using it to inform their approach to future cases. The trial had been a testament to the evolving field of forensic science, a narrative that would eventually become a part of law enforcement training programs across the country. For the suspects who had been caught in the web of suspicion, life took divergent paths. Charlene Cookie Christensen, cleared of any wrongdoing, pursued her dream of starting anew. She enrolled in a cosmetology program, her aspirations reflective of a national trend towards self-improvement and personal empowerment, much like the fitness craze epitomized by Jane Fonda's workout videos. Robert J. Stanhope, the retiree once entwined in the case, returned to his quiet life. He found solace in the routines of his community, his story a reminder of the personal toll that a brush with the criminal justice system can take, even for those ultimately uninvolved in the crime. Shelley Towers' family and friends sought comfort in memorializing her legacy. They established a scholarship in her name at the University of Florida, ensuring that her passion for the arts would inspire future generations. The local theater, where Shelley had once shown, dedicated its stage to her memory, a poignant tribute in a city known for its vibrant cultural scene. As the years passed, the Towers case became a part of St. Petersburg's history, a somber chapter in the otherwise sunny annals of the Sunshine City. Those affected by the tragedy found their own ways to cope and honor Shelley's memory, Their resilience a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and find hope in the wake of loss. In this episode of True Crime Case Files, we've unraveled the threads of a case that serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the curtain of ambition. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe and keep seeking the truth. Hey, True Crime Case Solvers, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe, True Crime Case Solvers.